I guess I was fairly apprehensive the whole time that I was flying in combat. And I guess there's good reason to feel that way. I'm there to cause a lot of damage and a lot of harm, and therefore they would like to damage me. And I was 25 years old at that time. Top Gun was really a thrill. I must have done well in actual combat because at the time I was just a lieutenant junior grade, which is a first lieutenant in the Air Force. And so I may have been the very first lieutenant junior grade to go through Top Gun. That was the dream of a lifetime come true. I had wanted to be an aeronautical engineer and a test pilot just like my dad from the time I was 10 years old. STS-27 was my third launch, and it was only the second launch after the Challenger accident. We were a top secret, classified Department of Defense mission, so to this day, if I told you what we carried, you could never leave this hangar. You'd be... Well, I will never forget. We maneuvered the arm, and Mike Mullane was my arm operator, so he moved the arm over there, and we brought up the television image of the right wing. And I looked at what I was seeing and I said to myself, we are going to die. To be an airline pilot, there was mandatory age 60 retirement. I was a NASA astronaut until I was 50 years old. And so I looked at the situation, and I had known a number of Southwest airline pilots. And they were just like me. They were flying because they loved to fly. Well, there's a lot of piloting that goes into it, a tremendous amount of piloting that goes into it, because you're going to wind up passing other airplanes. You're going to get in a duel with another airplane that's fairly closely matched. So there's a ton of satisfaction from doing that. And hey, let's just talk about the racing itself. It's fun to fly low, but it's dangerous. And so the only time I fly low is at the Reno air races. But watching the ground go by you at 400 and 500 miles an hour is pretty darn thrilling, because it's really scooting on by. And that's fun. That's really fun. I had always been fascinated by racing planes because they're sleek, streamlined, and they go real fast. There's that need for speed again, and they're raced around a pylon. And so I determined that I could break the existing altitude record for altitude and horizontal flight for that category of airplane. And in fact, I did that in 1991. And I'm fond of saying that if I have done well as an aviator, it's because my dad was the one who taught me how to fly. And he didn't just teach me how to fly, he taught me the why of it as well. He taught me the aerodynamics behind it, the reasons that you're doing things, not just how to do it, but why you're doing it is also very important.
Record these sessions that I could see? How would I get to see them?
Give me a moment, I'll give you a card. Oh man, they've been really good.
Yeah.
So I think if you go to the air-to-air-tv.com and you type in the Warbirds 2 promo code, I think you get the whole year for free. You can access.
Can you write that on here? Do you have a pen?
I do have a. I'll go get one. I'll write it.
I guess I was fairly apprehensive the whole time that I was flying in combat. And I guess there's good reason to feel that way. I'm there to cause a lot of damage and a lot of harm, and therefore they would like to damage me. And I was 25 years old at that time. Top Gun was really a thrill. I must have done well in actual combat because at the time I was just a lieutenant junior grade, which is a first lieutenant in the Air Force. And so I may have been the very first lieutenant junior grade to go through Top Gun. That was the dream of a lifetime come true. I had wanted to be an aeronautical engineer and a test pilot just like my dad from the time I was 10 years old. STS-27 was my third launch, and it was only the second launch after the Challenger accident. We were a top secret, classified Department of Defense mission, so to this day, if I told you what we carried, you could never leave this hangar. You'd be... Well, I will never forget. We maneuvered the arm, and Mike Mullane was my arm operator, so he moved the arm over there, and we brought up the television image of the right wing, and I looked at what I was seeing, and I said to myself, we are going to die. To be an airline pilot, there was mandatory age 60 retirement. I was a NASA astronaut until I was 50 years old. And so I looked at the situation, and I had known a number of Southwest airline pilots. And they were just like me. They were flying because they loved to fly. Well, there's a lot of piloting that goes into it, a tremendous amount of piloting that goes into it, because you're going to wind up passing other airplanes. You're going to get in a duel with another airplane that's fairly closely matched. So there's a ton of satisfaction from doing that. And hey, let's just talk about the racing itself. It's fun to fly low, but it's dangerous. And so the only time I fly low is at the Reno air races. But watching the ground go by you at 400 and 500 miles an hour is pretty darn thrilling, because it's really scooting on by. And that's fun. That's really fun. I had always been fascinated by racing planes because they're sleek, streamlined, and they go real fast. There's that need for speed again, and they're raced around a pylon. And so I determined that I could break the existing altitude record for altitude and horizontal flight for that category of airplane. And in fact, I did that in 1991. And I'm fond of saying that If I have done well as an aviator, it's because my dad was the one who taught me how to fly. And he didn't just teach me how to fly, he taught me the why of it as well. He taught me the aerodynamics behind it, the reasons that you're doing things, not just how to do it, but why you're doing it is also very important.
Good morning, Oshkosh. How is everybody doing this morning? All right. How many rookies do we have with us this morning? Your first air venture ever. Oh, we got one over there, got a couple in the back, not too bad. And the rest, all grizzled veterans. Good, welcome. Glad to have you back. Good morning. My name is Chip Berger. I am the voice of the Warbirds Living History Group. The Warbirds Living History Group is part of Warbirds. Our encampment is right over there. Please come see us. Folks like us and the folks behind me, all characters, every single one of them, but also amateur historians who would love to talk to you about the uniforms, the equipment, what we have in camp, artifacts, etc. You can't miss us. Just keep walking until you see the olive drab canvas, or just follow your nose for the musty smell. It's definitely recognizable. So good morning. What we try to do here as the opening act, warm-up act here for Warbirds in Review, is try to put a bit of a human face, a personal touch on the crews who worked in the plane, flew the planes, in this case passengers in the plane, because we got a very different mission than we normally do when we have a bunch of fighter planes or bombers or cargo planes and the like on the ramp here. We've got something rather different, and so we're going to have a lot of different looks here. But we try to put the human face on it in terms of what it was like, what they wore, and how the technology advanced throughout the war, because regardless of the country of origin, be it the UK, Canada, United States, etc., the technology of the uniforms and the gear, the flying kit in British parlance.
Headphones, and that would plug into the radio system. He's wearing an improved Mae West. This was introduced in 1941. It's got leg straps that ties that run through the crotch so you don't fall out of your Mae West if you hit the water very hard. It's got handles on the front for the air sea rescue people to haul you out of the water. And it has all kinds of little pockets for things like heliographs, dye packs. He's got a flotation lamp on the side activated by seawater and a wooden bob that bobs up and down with a light on. On his feet, instead of the 36 pattern flying boots, he's now wearing what are called 41 pattern with an ankle strap to prevent them falling off if he has to hit the silk, and a sudden stop causes the boots to come flying off his feet. On his back, if he turns around, you can see he's wearing the seat pack parachute. Pulls the handle, this will open, the seat chute will spill out behind him, and of course that's going to be under his butt when he's sitting in the cockpit. Thank you, Sergeant. Now I have Flight Lieutenant dressed in desert kit. Same Mae West as before. You can see it a little better now. You can see the handles more clearly. If you turn, you can see where the flotation lamp is stored. What's interesting about this is his flying helmet. Instead of being made of leather, it's now made of cotton, which is much better in the warmer climate. And it has a neck shield on it, so that when flying in the cockpit in North Africa, he's not going to get hit the back of his neck burned raw. Right, thank you. I'm now going to turn it over to our SOE agents, and they'll talk a little bit about the kit that they are wearing.
Good morning. Good morning. So I am Ryan Knapp, and I am here with my comrades in the SOE, otherwise known as the Special Operations Executive. These were the spies and the agents that you hear so much about that operated behind enemy lines in World War II. There was a British component, which was the SOE, and they had the American component, which was the Office of Strategic Services, or the OSS, which is the precursor to today's CIA. So the mission of the SOE and the OSS in World War II was to not only spy on the Germans behind enemy lines, but also to support the resistance movements in occupied Europe. And so they had to be able to be inserted behind enemy lines discreetly. And it was aircraft like the British Lysander and the British Lancaster and the American B-24s to drop these agents behind enemy lines. So what you see that I'm wearing today is what would be reminiscent of an agent who would be parachuted into France or dropped into France. I am wearing what would be civilian clothing so that the agent could blend in behind enemy lines. Also wearing a paratrooper style parachute, have a reserve chute on the front as well as my main chute on the back. You also notice that we all have suitcases, and you may wonder, well, what are those for? Well, not only would they be filled with supplies that the agents would use behind enemy lines, such as leaflets and explosives, all the things you hear about in the movies, but also, believe it or not, there were radios. And you have to remember, radios weren't as small as iPhones that they are nowadays. They were ginormous. And it actually was very tricky early on in the war to fit an entire radio in the size of a suitcase and be able to transmit from remote areas in France to SOE headquarters back in London. And as I said earlier, wasn't just men who were involved in this operation, but also the women. The SOE recruited about 3 or 4 dozen women, and they did serve behind enemy lines in World War II along with the men. It was found that the women were superior to men in some cases in terms of being wireless operators and couriers. Courier meaning that they would be the ones to sneak through the German lines, kind of be unassuming, and be able to transfer information between resistance groups behind enemy lines in World War II. So, as you can see here, there's a variety of clothing for a variety of places that they would have been sent. And it wasn't just France. They were inserted all over occupied Europe. So the Netherlands, Holland, Poland even. And even at the end of the war, they started inserting agents into Germany itself. And so you have a variety of clothing. Some maybe would have been inserted into Paris, and so they had to be able to blend in with the high class in Paris, or maybe out in the countryside somewhere, or maybe somewhere in rural towns and villages where a lot of these resistance groups gathered and performed their operations in. And particularly with the Lysander, known as the spy taxi, they would be the ones to actually insert the agents who would not be parachuted in and be able to drop them off, drop their equipment, and then in some instances also take them back out. So that is the SOE, and I'll hand it back to Chip Berger.
Thank you very much. And thank you very much, Frederick and Ryan, our speakers. How about a warm hand for our reenactors this morning? We do take great pleasure in trying to be as accurate as we can, both with the kit and the stories and what folks did and why their uniforms changed and why they used them. Sometimes it was choice, sometimes it was not, sometimes it was a matter of survival. But definitely appreciate your applause, especially for the folks who are dressed in slightly warmer clothes for flying at colder altitudes. So we do appreciate you helping us out while these gentlemen are sweating to the oldies, so to speak. The story of the SOE is really one of the great untold or undertold stories of the war. Winston Churchill was quoted as saying that in wartime, truth is so important. She must be protected by a bodyguard of lies. And so agents, counter-agents, et cetera, everything was done to a masterstroke during World War II. Anyway, we have, I think, ourselves a bit of time, so I would like to throw it open for some Q&A, again, about the gear. Oh, another quick comment. As Ryan Knapp described, he's wearing the parachute inserting in. Did you describe the harness at all? Okay, why don't you come forward here. Getting out of a parachute in a hurry after you've successfully used it to get on the ground can often be a priority. Especially if you've landed in the channel, you need to get all this heavy stuff off you. In this particular application, you want to get all this stuff off of you so you can hide it, bury it, etc., get away from it and get to where you need to be, get picked up by the French agents, the Maquis on the ground in Western France, etc. So this is an interesting piece of technology. You see some of the parachute harnesses have clips and bayonet fasteners and stuff like this. This is the quick get out of this here. This is the quick release. This is known as the bang box. Might be hard to see as you're sitting in the seats here, but there is some lettering on here. First of all, it can only go on one way, and that's the way you can read it if you're looking down. You turn this device and give it a good punch, and all of these connections fall aside. Drop it. Either bury it, let it sink to the bottom of the English Channel, whatever you need, and go on your way. So definitely a step up in improvements versus undoing a buckle here, buckle here, etc. And so you can see how this would be quite handy. And of course, during the war, they'd be serviced, greased, ready to go, boom, all the way off. From a pilot standpoint, wearing something like this, you have to be very, very careful that you don't do anything to touch that while you're undoing your straps that are holding into the aircraft. And so the bang box also had the nickname, the dial o' death, if you did it wrong. Later on, the Americans adopted the same thing, the technology, and you see that through the parachute harnesses of all sorts of nations during the war. But just wanted to point that out to you. I think we have some time for some Q&A. So any questions from the crowd? Any questions about the gear, the uniforms, the time period? All right, then. Well, thank you very much. Why don't you give yourself a hand for being such a great attentive audience early in the morning. We appreciate you coming out in the bleachers here. And since we do have a little bit of time before Miss Teresa comes out and entertains you with music of the period and later. Since we do have a little bit of time, if folks would want to come and join us for photographs, maybe we can do so over by the strip over there with the American flags for posing with that. If not, we'll be back this afternoon for this afternoon's Warbird in Review with the C-47. So until then, Chip Berger, voice of the Warbirds Living History Group, signing off. Have a fantastic day. See ya.
Thank you, Chip. And thank you, gentlemen. Folks, make sure to go over and visit the reenactors in their camp that you see to your left of you down the road there. You'll see the canvas tents. They'd be happy to talk to you more about their gear and what they do, and they put a lot of work into this, so show some recognition for it. And a good Thursday morning to the edition of Warbirds in Review. In just a few minutes, we'll be starting our program talking about this beautiful plane you see in front of you. So, folks, if you're in the Warbirds area, make your way over here to the bleachers. We'll be starting our program in just a few minutes. But before we do, we have some entertainment for you from a lady that's been with us for 10 years now at Warbirds in Review. If you would, please give a warm welcome to Miss Teresa Eamon.
Good morning, everyone. Hello, hello. So glad to see you here bright and early this morning. Welcome to all of you, whether it's your first year, your 10th year, or your 20-something year. We're very glad to see you here at Warbirds in Review. You're in for a real treat today and pretty much every day because at 10 and 1 o'clock, we present some of these beautiful airplanes along with the owners, the people who have restored them, and sometimes even people who flew them. So if this is something that you're interested in, hopefully you can make time for us in your day, every day, to come and see and learn a little bit more about American history through aviation. My name is Teresa Eamon. I am currently based in North Carolina. I drive up here every year. It's one of my favorite 18-hour drives. I've learned to look for great stuff like Skyline Chili in Ohio. And the Cheese Cave is always one of my favorites. So I'm glad to be here with you today. And we're going to sing some music from the 1940s today. I tried to find music that matches the era of the planes. And so we're going to take a journey back in time, and I like to start with Sentimental Journey. Gonna take a sentimental journey, gonna set my heart at ease, gonna take a sentimental journey to renew old memories. Got my bag, I got my reservation, spent each dime I could afford. Like a child in wild anticipation, I long to hear that all aboard. 7, that's the time we'll meet at 7. I'll be waiting up for heaven, counting every mile of railroad track that takes me back. Never thought my heart could be so yearning. Why did I decide to roam? Gonna take a sentimental journey, sentimental journey home. 7, that's the time we'll meet at 7. I'll be waiting up for heaven, counting every mile of railroad track that takes me back. Never thought my heart could be so yearning. Why did I decide to roam? Gonna take a sentimental journey, sentimental journey home, sentimental journey home. Thank you very much. Sorry for all the microphone noise. I know I'm full of hot air, but it's not usually this noisy. But we're so fortunate to have beautiful weather here at AirVenture. And if you're watching from afar on air-to-air-tv.com, I want to welcome you and tell you that the weather is nothing like it looked like it was going to be 2 weeks ago when I was afraid it was going to be in the high 90s. Today, it's actually a little bit chilly and definitely breezy, but perfect for watching airplanes. One of the nice things about the music of this time period between the 20s and the 40s was that they really understood how to make these songs speak to people's emotions. I think that's why they're still popular today. And some of the songs were happy, like Sentimental Journey. Some of them were about broken hearts. Some of them were about losing loved ones. But they always seemed to sum things up. This next song was a love song, a little bit of a ballad, but a little bit not, that came out in 1929. This is a song called It Had to Be You. It had to be you. It had to be you. I wandered around, finally found somebody who could make me be true, make me be blue, and even be glad just to be sad thinking of you. Some others I've seen might never be me, might never be cross or try to be boss, but they wouldn't do, for nobody else gave me a thrill. For all your faults, I love you still. It had to be you, wonderful you. It had to be you. Ba-da-dee-ba-ba-da, dee-dee-ba-bee-da-da-da-da, bee-ba-ba-da, bee-ba-da-da-da, ba-da-bee-ba-bee-dee-dee, sweetie. some others I've seen. They might never be mean. They might never be cross or try to be boss, but they never do. For nobody else gave me a thrill. For all your faults, I love you still. It had to be you, wonderful you. It had to be you. Thank you very much. Now I have to say that up in the bleachers here, there are people who come to see me literally every day, and several people who watch online as well. And so I do try to add a time or two a song that they have not heard before. And this is one that I really enjoy singing on my side hustle, which is singing at retirement and senior facilities, because nobody loves this music more than them. And this is a 1921 song that was written for Fanny Bryce. It's one of the first songs that I learned when I was little because my middle name is Rosemary. And it's about a girl who always takes second best. It's a song called Second. That's a silly little song, but one that I really enjoy. This next one, not so silly, but it's another one that came early on in the century, but was still popular during World War II. And this was written, I want to say in the 30s, actually. People think it was the 20s, but it was the 30s. I looked it up, and I'm of an age where things escape my memory. But it was written for Charlie Chaplin, and it's a song called Smile. Smile, though your heart is breaking. Smile, even though it's aching. When there are clouds in the sky, you'll get by if you smile. Smile, and maybe tomorrow you'll see the sun come shining through for you. Light up your face with gladness. Hide every trace of sadness. Although a tear may be ever so near, that's the time you must keep on trying. Smile, what's the use in crying? You'll see that life is still worthwhile if you just smile. That's the time you must keep on trying. Smile, what's the use in crying? You'll see that life is still worthwhile if you Thank you very much. Appreciate that. Yeah, so these songs really covered the entire spectrum of human emotion. So you had the sad ones, you had the funny ones, you had the happy ones, and then you had the ones that were just about love in general. And whether it was good love, bad love, or hey, don't forget me, this is one of those. This is an Andrews Sisters tune called Don't Sit Under the Apple Tree, and that was sent out to all the soldiers who were out there, or the women at home from the soldiers saying, hey, I'm still here, don't forget me. Even though lots of Dear John letters were sent. My mother, I wrote my father, and now I'm writing you too. I'm sure of mother, I'm sure of father, wanna be sure, very, very sure of you. Don't sit under the apple tree with anyone else but me. Anyone else but me. Anyone else but me. Oh, no, no, don't sit under the apple tree with anyone else but me till I come marching home. Don't you go walking down Lover's Lane with anyone else but me. Anyone else but me. Anyone else but me. Oh, no, no, don't go walking down Lover's Lane with anyone else but me till I come marching home. I just got word from a girl who heard from a girl next door to me about a boy she met who loves to pet and he fits you to a T. So don't sit under the apple tree with anyone else but me till I come marching home. Don't sit under the apple tree with anyone else but me. Oh, no, no, anyone else but me. Not a single soul but me. Don't you sit under the apple tree with anyone else but me. No, not till you see me. Not until you see me marching home. Home, 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 sweet home. Don't go walking down Lover's Lane with anyone else but me. Oh, no, no, anyone else but me. Not a single soul but me. Don't you go walking down Lover's Lane with anyone else but me. No, not till you see me. Not until you see me marching home. Home, 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 sweet home. Just wait till I come marching home. So don't go walking down the Lover's Lane, no. Walking down the Lover's Lane till you see me. Not until you see me marching home. Then we'll go arm and sit down under the apple tree. Baby, just you and me when I come marching home. Thank you very much. All right, I have one more for you. It is also an Andrews Sisters tune. But really quickly, I just want to... Songs or minutes? Songs. Oh, I got 2 songs for you. I misunderstood my cue because I wasn't paying attention. I get great cues, but I don't always notice them. So very quickly, let me tell you a little bit. I know you see the big TV up here, and what you are seeing up there is also being broadcast over the internet on a wonderful service called air-to-air-tv.com. And I will let you in on a little secret. Not everybody knows this, only people that come here to these shows. If you go to air-to-air-tv.com this week only, and you sign up, you can put in a code called Warbirds 22, and you will get a full year of all of their programming for free. So if you're a person that enjoys this kind of content and the things that you see during the day as you're walking through, the interviews, the stories about the airplanes, all things Warbirds related, air-to-airtv.com is for you. I am talking about them because they have been so supportive to me, but I also think they offer a very valuable product. Ladies, if your husband always wants things that take up room, this is the gift that takes up 0 space, and you will look like you're very much in touch with all of your husband's interests. So make sure you get there. The code is Warbirds22. You'll get a full year of service. Alrighty, so 2 more songs. This next song is not where I thought it would be. So will you please say hello to the folks that I know? Tell them I won't be long. They'll be happy to know that as you saw me go, I was singing this song. We'll meet again, don't know where, don't know when, but I know we'll meet again some sunny day. Keep smiling through, just like you always do, till the blue skies drive the dark clouds far away. So will you please say hello to the folks that I know? Tell them I won't be long. They'll be happy to know that as you saw me go, I was singing this song. We'll meet again, don't know where, don't know when, but I know we'll meet again some sunny day. Thank you very much. So I have one last one for you. This will really put some pep in your step before we get started with our next program. So if you're a foot tapper, a singer-alonger, a chair dancer, this one's going to be for you, and I encourage you to do it. Don't be shy. Your neighbor won't mind. This is a great song called, of course, Boogie Woogie Bugle Boy. He was a famous trumpet man from out Chicago way. He had a boogie style that no one else could play. He was the top man at his craft. But then his number came up and he was gone with the draft. He's in the army now, he's blowing reveille. He's the Boogie Woogie Bugle Boy of Company B. They made him blow a bugle for his Uncle Sam. It really brought him down because he could not jam. The captain seemed to understand, and so the next day the cap went out and drafted a band. And now the company jumps when he plays reveille. He's the Boogie Woogie Bugle Boy of Company B. A root, a toot, a tootly-out and toot, he blows 8 to the bar. In boogie rhythm, he can't blow a note unless the bass and guitar play with him. And the company jumps when he plays reveille. He's the Boogie Woogie Bugle Boy of Company B. He was some Boogie Woogie Bugle Boy of Company B. And when he plays Boogie Woogie Bugle, he's busy as a busy bee. And when he played, he made the company jump 8 to the bar. He's a boogie-woogie bugle boy of Company B. And a toodly-at, root toot, he blows 8 to the bar. In boogie rhythm, he can't blow a note unless the bass and guitar play with him. And the company jumps when he plays reveille. He's the boogie-woogie bugle boy of Company B. Yeah. He puts him on to sleep a boogie every night. He wakes him up the same way in the morning light. They clap their hands, they stamp their feet, because they know how he blows when someone gives him a beat. Wow, wow, he wakes him up when he plays reveille. Boogie-woogie bugle boy of Company B. And a root, toot, toot, he blows 8 to the bar. He can't blow a note unless the bass and guitar play wow with him. The company jumps when he plays reveille. He's a boogie-woogie bugle boy of Company B. Thank you so very much. Thank you to all of you for staying. Don't go anywhere because now you're here for the main event and you've got the best seats in the house. Hope to see you again at 12:30. If not, have a great day and a great rest of your time here at AirVenture. Thank you.
Thank you, Teresa. Ladies and gentlemen, Teresa Eamon, we're proud to have her as part of our team for many, many years now. Thank you, Teresa. You're a wonderful singer, wonderful person. We have a lot of great volunteers as they all swarm out here to change the setting here to get ready for this beautiful Lysander we're going to feature a little later on. We have had some very unique airplanes, very unusual airplanes, new restorations. We've had a great lineup this year, and today is no exception. Warbirds in Review. By the way, I'm Connie Boland. I'm the founder and now the coordinator, but I don't do all the hard work. Kyle Guyat right here does most of the detail hard work, and her husband Scott runs the production crew in the building behind me. And that building behind me was donated by Ron and Diane Fagan. They came a few years ago and said, you need somewhere where this great production crew can produce what you want to do. And we ended up with this building that we do have the production crew room, the green room where we're ready for the shows. So thank you to Ron and Diane Fagan. Scott's Miracle Girl Company, Jim Hagedorn is a great friend, great Warbirds supporter, and supporter of Warbirds in Review. This is all funded by sponsors, the donations that we receive to support this program, even down to the bleachers and the sound system. Just a little detail here. We in Warbirds in Review pay for all of this. And your support, your smiles, and the people that we recognize here is the reason we do this. And I'm very proud to say thank you to those two sponsors and the other sponsors that buy ads on our Jumbotron. But this outfit that I have on this morning, a special thanks to Jim Hagedorn, because I was able to fly his P-51 this morning for a couple of flights. Somebody needs to do it. Jim was not here today. He'll be back this afternoon, so I'll hand over the keys, although it doesn't have keys. But I'll give those back to Jim today. But this morning I had the honor of flying a young man who is why we're here. History, heritage, and heroes. And I'm sure he would, I don't want to put words in his mouth, but he would not consider himself a hero, but we do. Kyle Carpenter is the youngest Medal of Honor recipient, and he was in my back seat today, and he shared a video when we got back on the ground of us flying in the airplane. They have a picture of Kyle there. And can we show the video from my back seat this morning? We went over on the east side of the lake, and we all went in trail. There's another P-51 Mustang behind us there. We're all in trail doing rolls, and that's the coolest thing. That's going to be the highlight of my trip to Oshkosh. But here in, is that so cool? So that's why we do this, and it's a real pleasure. So our thanks to Kyle, and Kyle is right here. He'll give you a wave. This is all totally impromptu, but thank you, Kyle. It was an honor to have you in my back seat, and thank you for your service and all you have done. I mean, this is very special. Thank you very much. And now thank you. So we'll have the Veterans Parade here tomorrow, where we gather all the services, and they depart from here to go down to Show Center. At that time, we'll have several Medal of Honor recipients here, including General Brady. So we look forward to seeing you again tomorrow, Kyle. Thank you. It was so fun for me to have you in my back seat. That was so cool. Thank you. All right, and now, ladies and gentlemen, on to the main event here. We have a video about the Lysander, and once that is completed, Sam Bass, our moderator for this program, will be out with our main event. So if you will direct your attention to the Jumbotron, and thanks for being here.
The Lysander is a strange airplane. Compared to the Spitfire or Mustang, it's a big aircraft with a wingspan of about 50 feet. It was designed for short takeoffs and landings from rough, unprepared airfields. Its role was to provide the British Army with reconnaissance, artillery spotting, and general communications capability. Nicknamed the Lizzie, the Lysander was produced by Westland Aircraft and used immediately before and during the Second World War. Like other British Army air cooperation aircraft, it was given the name of a military leader. In this case, the Spartan General Lysander. The first Lysanders entered service in June 1938. 4 regular squadrons equipped with Lysanders accompanied the British Expeditionary Force to France in October 1939 and were joined by a further squadron early in 1940. Following the German invasion of France and the Low Countries on the 10th of May 1940, Lysanders were put into action as spotters and light bombers. In spite of occasional victories against German aircraft, they made very easy targets for the Luftwaffe, even when escorted by Hurricanes. 118 Lysanders were lost in or over France and Belgium in May and June 1940, of a total of 175 deployed. With the fall of France, it was clear that the type was unsuitable for the Coastal Patrol and Army cooperation role, being described by Air Marshal Arthur Barrett, Commander-in-Chief of the British Air Forces in France, as quite unsuited to the task. Once France was lost, the Westland Lysander was retasked with special duties and was used with great success, making clandestine flights into occupied territory at night on secret missions vital to the outcome of World War II to place or recover agents, particularly in occupied France with the help of the French resistance. The Lysander introduced STAL, short takeoff and landing capability crucial to today's military, long before the term was coined. As a flagship for spying missions behind the lines, it had no equal. A small lone aircraft winging through the night into enemy skies with little fanfare, except for perhaps diversionary missions by other aircraft in order to attract attention. This was stealth technology in the 1940s during World War II, and Westland Lysanders flown by the RAF were one of the original stealth aircraft. Restorer Mike Potter bought Lysander Charlie Foxtrot Victor Zulu Zulu from a Saskatchewan farm. Used briefly post-war as a crop duster, it had languished for decades until being largely restored by a Saskatchewan collection and warbird restorer, Harry Wariat, the man who also began the restoration on the Hawker Hurricane 12, joining us today. The Lysander is currently owned by John Carswell of Toronto, whose father, Andy Carswell, flew them with the RCAF. Pilot Dave Hadfield has said that flying a Lysander is truly a remarkable experience. One gets the feeling that with 20 hours or so in the airplane, you could do amazing things with it. Too bad they were never put on floats. Bush flying with a Lysander would be eye-opening.
All right, let's go. Good morning, folks. Thanks for coming. This is Dave Hadfield, and he is the pilot and the authority on this airplane, and he's very well qualified. He is the chief pilot of Vintage Wings of Canada. He comes from a large aviation family. You have, what, 8 flying at this time?
Yeah, 8 of us fly now.
His brother is Chris, and he was the first Canadian astronaut to walk in space. He's a retired Air Canada pilot. His Warbird qualifications are some of these. He's got a lot more. He's got a P-40, P-51, Spitfire, Hurricane, Lysander, and many others. Is that correct? He's also a musician, a songwriter, a sailor, and an author, and that's for another day. All right, have a seat.
Oh. Thanks, Sam.
Dave, this is to say the least, a very unique airplane, and part of the history was covered up here in the Jumbotron. But would you kind of elaborate on the development of this airplane, why it was developed?
Sure. So this was designed in the middle 1930s when most air forces in the world, and particularly the Royal Air Force, were flying biplanes. And they wanted a battlefield observation and utility airplane to be in place for the next war. And so Westland took the unusual step of actually going to the pilots of the Royal Air Force and saying, what would you like in an airplane of that kind? And they canvassed all the responses and put them together into the design of this airplane. And they wanted an airplane, the pilots wanted an airplane where they could see really well. And the visibility from that thing is superb. The pilot can adjust his seat so you're exactly at the wing level, so only a very small part of the view is blocked out. You can see above, you can see below. The windows come way down, so you just a little bit of angle of bank, you have a perfect view. And of course, it's the same for the person in the back seat. So if you're taking up a general or something to show him the front lines, he could see everything very clearly. The other thing the pilots wanted was really good STOL characteristics, short takeoff and landing, so that they could land very close to the battlefield. And they wanted the capability to land through ditches and mud and obstacles and rocks and all that sort of thing. And you can see the result, of course, in the design of this main landing gear. They wanted heat. They wanted a canopy, all those things you don't necessarily have in a biplane. They wanted an engine with a self-starter because, you know, those Hawker biplanes from the 1930s didn't have a starter in the Kestrel engines. They had a Model T type of contraption that would spin up the propeller called a Huck starter. So all these things were put together by the Westland team, and they came up with this design. It looks a little unusual to our eyeball, but in 1935 it was innovation and cutting edge.
Well, how about the specifications on the airplane?
Specifications?
Yeah, I thought the engine and
yeah,
range.
Well, it's a big airplane, as you can see, a 50-foot wingspan. It's heavy, but you can make it maneuver. It's very light on the rudders, sort of normal in pitch for the range that you can actually control it in, and a little bit heavy in the ailerons, but you can make it move, you can make it cavort. Shall I talk about the flaps and slats?
Yes, go ahead. Talk
Yeah,
about it.
so the most unusual feature that they designed into the airplane. Hey, Xavier, would you come down here? This is one of our support team members, Xavier from Quebec and from Vintage Wings. If you wouldn't mind climbing up on that side, and he'll show you how the flaps and slats work. And this is really unique. Now, leading edge slats, the ones on the front of the wing, are in two sections. And yeah, the hardest thing is not falling off that airplane, to be honest. I've been flying it around for 6-7 years now, and I haven't fallen off yet, and I'm really proud of that. But anyway, pardon?
If that wasn't you, we'd be calling an ambulance.
Yeah. So many airplanes have leading edge slats, and they're activated totally by the airflow. But in this airplane, they're linked to the flaps through some very clever gearing and chains and springs and that sort of thing. They're cross-controlled or cross-linked so that they can't go out asymmetrically and give you a roll, which you wouldn't want. They don't come out in any gradations. They just come out very smoothly. So as you decelerate, starting at about 105 miles an airplane, miles an hour, the way this airplane is rigged, they start creeping out, and they're completely out by the time you flare and touch down at about 60. So it's very transparent as a pilot. You can't select them, you can't lock them in, can't lock them out, can't extend them, can't retract them. They're completely automatic. And that has some really interesting ramifications for when you're on approach.
Well, does it change your pitch attitude?
Yeah, thanks, Xavier. So, yeah, as you change your pitch attitude, you change the lift vector, which influences where the slats and flaps go. So it has some strange characteristics. If you're on approach and you're just a little high, the tendency is to lower the nose. As soon as you do that, the angle of attack decreases, the flaps and slats come in, the airspeed shoots up, and you go way long. On the converse side, if you're a little bit short, you pull the nose up, angle of attack increases, they deploy to the maximum. The speed drops, you start this tremendous descent rate, and then if you goose the throttle, the Bristol Mercury has a really unusual accelerator pump. It's over-muscled, much bigger than it has to be in the carburetor, and you get what's called a rich cut. So the engine quits just when you're coming down like a ton of bricks. And there are lots of World War II pictures of these things plonked down onto the ground 300 feet short of the runway with the wings draped over them. So it's unusual, this whole flaps and slats thing. Now, when you're just maneuvering, like over a battlefield, or as you saw in the video at an air show display, it's a piece of cake. It's great. It's wonderful. It's the original hands-on throttle and stick. You don't have to deploy anything. But in this landing environment, you can't move the nose up and down on approach. It just destabilizes everything. So what I tend to do, and of course this is just my own method, but on the downwind leg I get the speed back to 80, so I have a good deployment of these. And I get the power back to a rate of descent that's probably going to get me at the touchdown point, more or less. And then maybe I stay a little bit high, and then I try not to touch either power or speed, keep them constant. And I do a slipping turn onto final, and then side slip as required, just like it's a Stearman or a Waco, to get to adjust the touchdown point. And that's what I find works out for me. And generally it's a 3-point landing, and the airplane likes to do that. It does that better than a wheeler, and it tends to stay straight. So those are good characteristics, and that's what I worked out how to land the thing.
While you're talking about that, you mentioned to me yesterday that an average Warbird pilot that's got a lot of time in a T6 or something, they could normally just transfer into a P-51 or P-47, but this airplane doesn't work that way. Is that correct?
That's right. Yeah, so as Sam said, if you have a tail dragger background and you check out in a T6 and you've got those kinds of skills, and you walk up to a fighter, a Mustang or something, and someone tells you how to get the gear up and down, how to start it, how the fuel systems work, chances are you could get it around the patch and on the ground again without damaging it. But not this airplane. It's weird. In addition to that flaps and slat thing, the elevator is not powerful enough to control the airplane at either end of the envelope. So if you're coming down on final and you have the trim in the middle, and then you pull the power to idle, to flare, you could pull the stick right back to your spine and it'll just go like this and arrow into the earth. Same thing if you're going around. If you had the trim in the middle and you went to go around power, the thing will go for the moon even if you have the stick buried in the instrument panel. So that's not so great. The original test pilot from Westland in 1936, Harold Penrose, when he first took it up, he was exploring the landing environment there before he came down and committed for landing, and he had trouble getting it into a landing attitude, and he had to do that with a combination of power and blowing air over the tail and getting the nose up and then just keeping that going till he plunked it down. And he suggested that they completely redesign the horizontal surfaces on the tail. But instead, Westland wanted to get the airplane operational, and so did the Royal Air Force, because it was a big PR effort. The new airplane for the Royal Air Force, they wanted to get this into service. So they put the horizontal stabilizer on a jack screw, and that's the trim mechanism, kind of like a Cub. And so you have to use it to control the airplane. You need the authority of the horizontal stabilizer to flare the airplane or go around. So this is a little different from a pilot's point of view, right? The way I do it is when I'm about 200 feet above the ground, I commit. I'm landing, period. I don't care what anybody says. I don't care if a truck comes out, I'll go around it. And at that point, I lock the stick, with my hand, and then I start winding the trim, which is a horizontal stabilizer, back so that 15 seconds from now, I can pull the power back and I have the authority I need to flare. So that's a very different way of operating an airplane. So. You've got to think what you're going to need, the control regime you're going to need in 15 or 20 seconds.
Well, how did you figure that out the first time?
And I almost plunked it into the ground, right? And I went, whoa, that's not very good. I'm not doing that again. So I worked out with our chief pilot at the time, who was a very experienced test pilot, John Aitken, and he was a chief test pilot for the National Research Council of Canada, and we, worked out a regime and a way to fly it for takeoff and landing that suits the airplane.
Well, tell us about the little guns up here on the spats.
So these spats are really interesting. They're not just decorations. They house a bunch of mechanisms. I can get up here, right? Sure. So this is where the 303 machine guns were, one on each side. And 2 screws, you can open up this and expose the breech mechanism of the gun and remove it. This was the belt feed down for it. So when they went to France in 1940, they had carried guns, and the guy in the back seat had a machine gun for defensive fire. So that was one option for that. The spats are hiding a shock absorber that's right built into the wheel hub. So not only do we have the flex of the whole arch the gear leg, but you've got a shock absorber built right into these big wheels too. So that really helps on the rough ground. And then these this plate could be removed, and then a little stub wing would come out, and they could hang small bombs off that, or life raft, and they use this for search and rescue in the English Channel. And if there was a pilot floating down there with a life jacket, they could drop a raft, a safety raft, a rescue raft to him. So it had it was a very flexible airplane. You could configure it for a lot of different jobs.
So that in the video up here, it said it was not successful as in liaison, if you want to call it that. Could you extemporate on
what
about it was not successful as far as liaison earlier in the war?
Sure. When they designed the airplane, they figured that the next war would be kind of like the last war, right? It would be a bit like World War I with trenches and fixed fighting lines, and so this would be great for taking a general up to see what's what. However, of course, nobody expected that that the Germans would conquer France in 2 weeks in May of 1940, and that the battle was a battle of movement. So there wasn't really the role for this airplane, and it couldn't defend itself against the Messerschmitt 109s. It wasn't successful in that role. But it's such a flexible airplane that they were able to use it for many other jobs afterwards.
Well, and the clandestine, give us just a typical flight for a clandestine flight.
Yeah, so it was employed by the Special Operations Executive from 1942 to 1944. And this was Churchill's, one of Churchill's ideas and programs to support the French resistance, spies. In fact, there's a gentleman named on the side. I think you can see it on this side as well. Yeah, Cliff Stewart. His designation was W5, just like 007. He's a Canadian from the Maritimes who went in with Lysanders and back out again 5 different times, teaching the French resistance about dynamite and detonators and codes and ciphers and radios and all the stuff that they needed to function under the noses of the Gestapo. So this was the program, and they would land spies in France and then pick them up again later. So they operated in moonlight, about a week on either side of the full moon, and they would land in just a cow pasture in France that was suggested by the resistance. So these resistance fighters had already been to England. They'd been trained to select a field so the pilot wouldn't end up hitting trees or wires or end up in a ditch or something like that. So these fields were, supposed to be good for the airplane, for the pilot. But they landed in the dark. And even though this airplane has tremendous landing lights on either side, and it's got a chute in the back for parachute flares. The pilot can release a parachute flare and light up the whole world. They couldn't do that because that would tell the Gestapo where they were, right? So they landed on the light of 3 flashlights. So they'd have guys down there in the field shining flashlights up into the sky in an L formation. And the airplane would come in and land, towards the leg of the L, plunk it down onto the ground, turn around in the direction of the L, back taxi. As they back taxied, whoever was on board would be bailing out of the airplane, and they had a ladder welded to this side, the port side of the airplane, an external ladder. So people will be climbing down, and then other people will be climbing back in. And the pilot, of course, he just wanted to spend the smallest amount of time on the ground before a trap was sprung or the Germans would show up with a truckload of guns. So he'd taxi back, they'd swing around, wouldn't shut down the engine, and off they'd go again. And this was a very successful program. They didn't lose very many airplanes. There's a tremendous book about it called We Landed by Moonlight by the fellow who led that program, Hugh Verity, and it's a real eye-opener.
So it's successful as a clandestine, but not as a liaison, I suppose, so you say. And then you mentioned about how it flies and the quirks, the history of this particular airplane.
Yeah, so this is a Canadian airplane built in Toronto by National Steel Car, where the Toronto Airport, Pearson Airport, is right now, right on the northeast corner of the field in a factory, same factory that later produced the Avro Aero, the jet. And 220 of these were made in Canada. This particular airframe never went overseas. It worked within the training system of the British Commonwealth Air Training Plan from 1942 till the end of the war. And it was used for a number of duties, including gunnery training. So there's a hatch under the center, kind of looks like Bombay doors. And you could open that, a big reel would go down, like a big fishing reel. They could let out 1,000 feet of line with a drogue on the end, and then other aircraft would fly up alongside and practice shooting that. So they were training the gunners for the Lancasters and those other aircraft.
How about this particular paint job on this?
Yeah, so this particular airframe was not painted in these colors when it was in operational service. When it was towing the drogue, they made it as bright as possible, right? It was what they called the Oxidol paint job from the laundry detergent. It was yellow and black stripes all the way around the airplane. And that was so that the gunners would shoot the drogue, not the airplane. Whenever they messed up and they got the bullets, the tracers and everything a little too close to the airplane, the pilot of the Lysander said, "Hey, we're pulling this thing, not pushing it." So anyway, so this one in its original service was in that stripe paint job, but there was already one flying with that paint job. So we decided to recreate the paint and the scheme, the color scheme of the very first one made in Canada, fin number 416, and this is the way it came out of the factory. So,
well, the restoration to this airplane was in pretty bad shape when you got it, wasn't it?
Yeah, well, yeah, so at the end of the war, in Saskatchewan where this became surplus, farmers just bought them because they couldn't otherwise get wires and switches and valves. They needed hardware, and there was a lot of useful hardware in these airplanes, Hurricanes, Lancasters, Blenheims, Bolingbrookes, all those kinds of airplanes. But this Harry Wariat, a pilot, collector, farmer in Saskatchewan, got 3 of them, and he was able to put them all together, so yeah, they were all in rough shape. They'd been stripped and parked out in fence rows and behind the barn and that sort of thing. But you can replace wires and switches. The basic structure was very intact, and this airplane is a very original airplane. It's the opposite of a data plate restoration. We have all kinds of, most of the metal on this is original. All this stuff around the spats, I mean, that's not modern and made in an English wheel. That's all original. And these data plates, they were put there by the people in the factory there at National Steel in 1942. So when we got it, we stripped it and took it all apart and replaced some of the wood because it's a wooden structure. Let me just open this up for you. So as you can see, it's a steel tube structure, but then it's wood in there, and then a fabric cover, right? So, hey, Steve, I'll just pass you this so it doesn't fly away in this wind. And it's a unique airplane. It's light for its volume because of that. It's the combination of steel, wood, and fabric and aluminum made it do its job very well.
How long did it take you to do the restoration?
It was about 2 years. We just had to send the engine overseas. This is in terms of restoration, Steve, Terry, guys, stand up. We have some of the original restoration crew here, and they drove all the way from Ottawa to support the airplane. And Xavier, you stand up, and Robin, and the whole crew here. And then where's John and Jeff from Lysander Group? They're here taking pictures somewhere. There they are down there. Yeah, the people who've supporting the airplane now. So it was a big effort to. We had a big team. We had about 15 guys working steadily every weekend under the management of someone who had already restored one for the Hamilton Group. And yeah, they did a great job. Sometimes it was woodworking school, sometimes it was fabric school, but everybody enjoyed the experience, and everything's working just fine here 12 years later.
Did you do just a little short walk around here? Not one of the big walk around, but a short walk around?
A walk around? Yeah,
and
sure.
kind of show us what's going on.
Well, let's see.
Why don't you start the engine?
Start the engine?
Yeah.
It's a Bristol Mercury, and it's the only one flying in North America. This is the only Lysander flying in North America. It's 850 horsepower, so it's quite powerful. It's kind of like a Wright 1820 that's in a B-17. It's a geared engine. That's the geared assembling at the front there, that bullet. And it's supercharged, got a geared supercharger. So it's actually a very powerful engine for its frontal area. And this propeller is not constant speed. It's a de Havilland propeller, and it's either coarse or fine, so that's the only selection you have in the cockpit. The hardest part about it is getting up and down without falling off. I can't really demonstrate that in the... I'll do it for the cameras because they can get me on this, but I'm sorry the airplane's in the way, but you know, I've learned over the years, I marked this first footstep with a piece of tape so I can find it, and there, and then I switch hands, and then I switch feet, and I grab it here, and I grab it there, switch feet again, other one goes in the stirrup, and then I'm up here ready to change the light bulbs for the airport light stands. So it's a long way up, it really is. And I don't know, to get here I think I was up and down about 200 times on this flight so far. But the point of view, the field of view you have is great. The seat goes way up and down, and then if you're taxiing around after landing, you can actually unhook your straps and stand up in the seat practically because it uses a hand brake. Right, it's not toe brakes. It's a pivoting rudder bar down there, and you squeeze the hand brakes. They're pneumatic brakes, and you know they're drum brakes, pneumatically powered, and you can steer it while your head is up high, and you can actually see where you're going. You can't do S turns in this like you can in a P-51. The tail wheel's free castering. You can't lock it straight. It's free castering. And the brakes don't work very well. So it's an interesting experience to taxi it around in these narrow taxiways. Initially, it was supposed to be operated out of a grass field, right? A big square 15-acre grass field, but you're always landing in the wind. You don't really need brakes. And it works great in that role. But for flying around in modern airports, I have to consider that I can often land situations where I can't taxi. So it's like flying a ski plane or a float plane. You have to think in your head as a pilot, what are you going to do after you land? How am I going to get to, you know, where I have to go, the dock or the... Anyway, so that's the first thing in the walk around. And the next is all these British fasteners. They tend to, all these things, they tend to vibrate loose. So as you go around with either a Zeus tool or you know, Swiss Army knife, which is what I use most of the time, and you're always finding some that are loose. These panels all come off in just a few seconds. You saw me demonstrate that. So you got to go around and make sure all the pins are pushed in hard. The airplane does shake a little bit. You wouldn't want to lose one of these things. This is a most interesting, unusual. This thing here is the exhaust pipe collector. So the exhaust goes forward into the front of the cowl, and then it's collected and put out through this long pipe. This exciter tube goes down the center and can function as a cabin heat for winter if you want to do that. This made it very quiet during the Special Operations Executive in France. You know, with the engine pulled back a little bit, and all the exhaust going through this pipe, it was very quiet. You could fly over a village and no one would know you were there. After that, you go up, like we showed you earlier, make sure the flaps and slats are working well, working evenly and smoothly. And it's kind of like a regular walk around after that.
Well, Dave, we really appreciate it. Thank you for bringing the airplane.
Oh, Sam, it's a pleasure. And I'd like to say, well, there's a particular gentleman who was mentioned in the film, John Carswell. His father was Andy Carswell, who was shot down in a Lancaster, World War II, wrote a great book called Over the Wire, and then he flew these after the war, right? So John was in the RCAF in the early 1980s and runs an investment company, but when this airplane was put up for sale, he thought it should not leave the country. So he went, he put, his money where his mouth was. He stepped up and he bought the airplane. So Jonathan and Jeff, they're the representatives of John Carswell. John couldn't make it. He's he's got a wedding to go to and some other concerns right now. But there's Jeff. Where's Jonathan? Oh, anyway,
these sons.
Anyway, they support the owner, and we really appreciate John for making this all happen and sending us out, even though he wasn't going to be able to join us.
Yeah. Okay. How many veterans do we have? Please stand up. Let's recognize the veterans here.
Veterans.
And we have some time now for questions. If anybody has any questions, we've got people with mics here. If you just raise your hand.
This one. Oh, yeah, need a microphone. Good.
Yeah.
Hello. I'm just curious, you said this was the only one in North America. Any idea how many are flying worldwide? How many are left flying?
There are 2 flying in the UK. One at Duxford, and I believe you can go for a ride in that if you want. And then one at the Shuttleworth Collection in the UK. There's one being restored by Sabina in Belgium, but I don't know what stage it's at. There are quite a few in museums, but I'm just talking about flying airplanes.
Over here.
You mentioned that's the only British Mercury in North America, and I think you were going to go into it earlier as far as who did the engine work. You had to send it overseas. Could you go into that a little bit?
Yeah, this engine is made out of unobtainium now. I mean, we didn't want to come here without a spare cylinder in a box in case we blew a jug, right? Could not find one. So it is a rare experience to fly a Bristol Mercury, and it's not going to last forever, There are spares, but there are so few now that everyone who has them is hoarding them, just like I would. You can't blame them. And to find parts is really difficult. So, yeah, this was restored by John Romain's outfit, ARC at Duxford. This engine was overhauled, was zero-timed in about 2008. And it only has about 100 hours on it. And I suspect it'll go 400 or 500 hours at the power settings that I'm using. So I think we still have time on it. And who knows, that'll be a number of years before we have to overhaul it again, I hope. Let me see, where's wood? Where's wood? Yeah. And maybe there will be more parts available by then. I sure hope so.
Can you speak about pilot training, and can it be flown from the back seats?
I'm sorry, say.
Can you speak about pilot training for their aircraft, and can it be flown from the back seats?
Yeah, well, pilot training in this is a big conundrum, right? Because it flies differently from everything else. And in the British Commonwealth Air Training Plan, just like here in the States, generally the pilot maker was the T6, the Harvard, right? But it's not really good preparation for this, and that's why there are lots of pictures of crashed Lysanders by the side of the runway from that period. So what I found most useful is to get into the British frame of mind. British airplanes are different from North American airplanes. Not better, not worse, but different. You look at the turn and bank instrument, which is a great big thing. It's got 2 pointers on it, and the top one is the ball, not the bottom one, right? You got to get used to little things like that. You got to get used to a no-brake kind of an airplane. So if you've ever flown a Moth that has, it's a British one, that has no brakes and just a tail skid, that's good trainer. you have to do the research and get the briefings and understand the foibles of this airplane before you fly it. But it's handy if you've been flying oddball types where you don't have good brakes and you don't have good steering.
Crosswind landings.
Sorry?
Crosswind landings.
Crosswind landing. It's actually not bad in a crosswind. The rudder is quite effective, and you generally just 2-point it like a side slip and a 3-point landing, except you're touching down on the upwind main and on the tail wheel. You can wheel land it, but there's a lot of bounce in this structure. It's kind of like landing a Citabria. Any energy you feed into it is coming right back at you, and you get thrown back up into the air. It tends to track pretty straight. So I'm comfortable on a cross country with a 10-knot crosswind. I could probably do a little more, but I'd rather not.
What speed?
Well, I come in at 80, but you're going to touch down at about 60. Yeah, miles an hour. Yeah. I'd be touching down at about 60, 65. And but it's funny, these brakes are never the same. Like always one brake's a little better than the other. So sometimes if the wind's between two runways, you'll pick the one where if you have to use brake to stay straight, you got the better brake, right? So again, you're thinking about what you're going to do after you touch down before you commit to it. And there are times you can land this airplane and you can't taxi it. So, if it's a strong wind, you can land directly into it, and that's great, but you have a heck of a time doing a 180, right? And I often take somebody like Xavier in the back seat so he can jump out, put his shoulder to the back of the airplane, turn it around so I'm on the vector I want, and then he pops back in and we taxi towards the ramp. It's an awkward thing, on a windy day. Yeah, here at Oshkosh, I'd get towed out to the runway or very close to it.
Yes, sir.
The Mercury's a sleeve valve engine?
No, Bristol made both, right? And the Lysander 2 had a Perseus, which was a sleeve valve. This is the Lysander 3, and these are poppet valve engines with the Bristol Mercury. There's 4 valves on each cylinder, like 2 exhaust, 2 intake, and they're exposed valve stems, which is actually pretty handy if you're trying to diagnose whether or not you got a stuck valve, and I was in that situation coming out here. These cowlings come off quite simply. They take a couple of people because they're big and clumsy, but just a couple of diaper pins and big over-center hooks, and then boom, you got one off, boom, you got the other off. And then you got all 9 cylinders exposed, and then you can close the valve and then just put a wooden handle on the end of the stem and push it and make sure it's not stuck. Very simple and very good. I like that aspect of the design. They did operate some in Canada with the sleeve valve engine, the Perseus, but they're hard to operate in the cold of a Canadian winter because the sleeves tend to gum up and hard to keep them warm enough to run.
Are you going to fly it in the show?
I hope so. I think today's a jet day, right? Besides which, I'm not at the briefing, but we'll see about tomorrow. And I'd like to fly it very much in the show, but as I say, it depends on the wind. And a day like this, I'd be reluctant to do it.
There was a second one in Canada that was yellow and black, and you mentioned this was the only
Yes.
one. What happened to it?
Well, it suffered an engine failure. Yeah, I was flying this one around that year, and the pilot's here on the grounds. I don't know, Rick, are you in the stands? Okay, he's a judge here, so he's probably doing some of that kind of work today. And he said it went from smooth, calm, lovely day to crunch, and prop stopped in about 5 seconds as the engine ate itself inside. So then he had to dead stick it in and
salvage the airframe?
He didn't have the best choices. He was in an area with a lot of power lines and windmills. So he got down fine, and both himself and the passenger were 100%, fine, no problem. But one of these gave way, so they haven't restored the airplane yet. I mean, it's all very doable, but it's just a question. Museums have priorities about what they're going to. So if there's a donor who wants to sponsor that restoration in the audience, there's an opportunity there.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, a question. Would you ever consider modifying
anything for like the brakes to, re-engineering anything, or
Yeah.
for the turning with maybe putting some
Yes.
baffles or something?
Well, this airplane that was the question was just asked about, the one from Hamilton, they put hydraulic brakes on it, and it was just as bad. It's something to do with the architecture of this whole.
Did they put toe brakes on it also, or just it's still the handle?
I think they still use the handle, if I remember right, but they put basically the brakes off a Cessna 310 on it, I believe.
Okay.
And it didn't really help. Someone asked about the back. Just operating the canopy. The person in the back seat can open and close the canopy very easily, and you can do it at any speed. There's no limitation.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
When it was flown into an occupied country, how many people could they get in it?
Well, with
that's good.
with 850 horse and these big wings, you can carry anything you can get inside it. So it's kind of volume limited rather than weight limited. So if someone was running away from the Germans and this was their only way out, they didn't care about comfort, right? And so there was one case that actually put 5 people in the back seat. Right now we just have 1. They just cram people in.
Yes, sir.
That exhaust cowling is beautifully done. I'm wondering how unique it is to this aircraft, or had it been incorporated in other designs?
I had never seen it incorporated in any other designs. It's not a great idea to have the hot part at the front of the engine, right? Because it overheats on landing. It overheats on the ground because you got a big hot thing at the front warming up air that's then going through the cylinders. When I landed here, I had to shut down in the grass out there, just pull the plug because I didn't want the cylinders to overheat and crack, while I was here. So I mean, it's beautiful and it's shapely and it's very streamlined and all that. But sooner or later, exhaust gases are going to corrode this. There's no way around that. And frankly, I wouldn't recommend that as a design, but that's what we have to live with, right? That's the way they did it.
Anyone else?
I would just say something else, Sam.
Yeah, go ahead.
A lot of people link this up in kind of the same category as the Fiesler Storch, and that's not really correct. The Storch is supreme at STOL, but it can only go slow. One thing about this is you can fly it at 200 miles an hour if you want. If you actually put the throttle up. It's very streamlined. I encourage you to walk in front of it later and look down. It's a very streamlined airplane. And if you tried to do 200 miles an hour in a Storch, you just rip the wings off.
What's the range on the airplane?
It's got a 95 imperial gallon tank, and it burns just under 30 imperial gallons an hour at the power settings I'm using. So it's about 3 hours to a dry tank. So after about 2 hours, I'm looking for a place to land.
How long were the missions over there?
Missions were much longer. So they had an external tank underneath that looked like a torpedo, and it had fuel in that. So they also had to put a bigger oil tank in it for those 5. It would be 2.5 hours into France and 2.5 hours back.
What does the oil burn on this normal?
Well, it depends on the temperature. It's like an 1820 in a B-17 in many ways, right? So, 2 to 4 quarts an hour is not unusual. Right. It's pretty standard, and a lot of it gets pushed out, and then you're looking for volunteers to help you clean the belly of the airplane after you land.
Okay. Anyone else? Well, David, thank you very much.
Thank you,
Sam. We really appreciate it. That's very unique.
But we're not done yet. This is Sam's birthday. Okay, this is Sam's birthday. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Sam. Happy birthday to you.
A real professional singer, too. By the way, if you guys want to hear him sing, go on the YouTube and look up Dave Hadfield and look up, what is it, My Canada?
One of them's called In
Canada. That's the good one. That's the good one. And it'll refer you to others. And it's he and his brother, the astronaut, are singing, and they're very good.
We have a lot of fun. Anyway,
have
a great time at Oshkosh.
for grass, made to feel the joy of each and every blade, between our toes, across our backs, to run over its hills, marvel at its beauty, and find comfort in its stillness. We were made for grass. It's where we battled and celebrated, built monuments, grew families, forged memories, and pushed ourselves farther than ever before. We were made for grass, to care for, nurture, and cultivate. We've always made sure to have a patch of our own, because there's no greater feeling than being on the grass, except leaving it.
Roger, 527, maintaining 4,000 runway.
join this organization, and it's a constant learning process, and that's another thing that I love about it, because a good pilot is always learning, always.
NETA membership isn't just for pilots, it's for everyone who loves aviation, past,
present and future.
We have a lot of members that are not, they're not even pilots. They love the fact that the airplanes still fly, and they share the enthusiasm and the pride that's going on.
It's a place where history comes to life, where the future is sparked by imagination, and where aviation is more than just wings in the air.
That's what it's all about at the end of the day. What else is it for?
I was asked, where do I see NATA going into the future? And I see nowhere but up.
Be a part of it. Join NATA today.
climbs off all by itself. It does it itself. Okay?
Yeah, you're right there with me though.
Every time I open the hangar door to go flying, I realize that I'm one of the lucky guys doing something that I dreamt of as a kid.
World War II changed the world forever, and forever after. Fagan Fighters World War II Museum of Granite Falls, Minnesota was created as a tribute to the men and women of the greatest generation, whose incredible sacrifices during World War II won and preserved the freedoms we enjoy today. The Fagan Fighters World War II Museum is the dream, the creation, and the passion of the Fagan family of Granite Falls, Minnesota. Ron and Diane Fagan and their sons Aaron and Evan.
We've taken on a mission to connect the latest generation with the greatest generation because these are events in our history that need to be remembered, and in our case, and in the case of young children, they need to be introduced to. And we feel they're very important and need to be preserved, and that's what we're trying to do.
The mission is to preserve the memory of the heroes of World War II, promote patriotism in today's Americans, and inspire tomorrow's leaders to study and apply history's lessons. It's not enough that these beautiful airplanes are collected and restored. The Fagan Museum restores each of them to flying condition.
I think with everything at the museum, having stuff operational is important because people get to see them, how they were used, and get to hear them start up, and it gives people a better perspective of what these machines were capable of and what they look like in here.
There are no markers, monuments, or visitor centers in the skies above Europe, the Pacific, or the China, Burma, India theaters of World War II. These airplanes are the monuments. They are timeless portals to the courage and deeds of those who gave their all to preserve all that we hold dear. When the museum's airplanes are not flying, they are displayed in 3 hangars: the trainer hangar, the fighter hangar, and the bomber hangar.
World War II was a worldwide conflict, and unfortunately it's not being taught in our schools anymore. But history always has a tendency to repeat itself, so we got to educate the younger generations about World War II. So learn these experiences from the past so you can apply them in the future to help guide this country in the right direction.
I know the buildings are built to last 250 years. The stories that are contained within these buildings will last just as long. We're connecting some of the battles. The only thing we can connect them with are the ground machines, which many people have a connection to rather than the aircraft.
With the museum opening, I started looking into the military vehicles. Started with the Deuce and a Half. The ambulance, when I had that repainted, we made sure that it matched the 4th Medical Battalion. And the 4th Medical Battalion actually were the first ambulances to arrive on D-Day. The ground vehicles all operate fully functional, and we could start them all up and take off and drive them right now.
The Fagan Fighters World War II Museum doesn't just tell the story of what happened. It is dedicated to preserving the stories of those who lived it, telling us how it happened. Veterans and others are invited to the museum to share their stories firsthand. Their stories are recorded and preserved through the museum's Voices of Valor program.
Let's do our museum around my father, Ray Fagan, and his World War II experiences. The first campaign medal he got was Normandy invasion. Second campaign medal he got was Liberation of Paris. And the third campaign medal he got was the Battle of the Bulge. He said, you can't imagine how terrible it was.
We decided to make our collection a real museum when people referred to it as such. We opened the museum doors directly after our air show in 2012, so the date was June 17th, 2012.
The Fagan Fighters World War II Museum puts its collection in context for visitors by using original murals, sculptures, paintings, photographic collections, and other fine art to tell the story of epic events such as D-Day, June 6, 1944. This rail car, which anchors the museum's Holocaust exhibit, was found after years of searching in Germany and brought here so that no generation will ever forget the horror of the Holocaust or the memories of those who were lost.
When the Germans marched in, I was 7 years old. When I was liberated in January 18, 1945, I was 8 years old. And these are some of the things I remember.
The best single teacher we have about the lessons of the Holocaust are survivors. And for years, they've been the most important teachers. Sadly, as historian Deborah Lipstadt would say, the tyranny of biology means we have fewer and fewer survivors to speak. Memorials, and that's almost too static a term, opportunities to learn, like this exhibit, which opens people's eyes to the horrors of the Holocaust, are becoming ever more important in the absence of survivors. So what the Fagans have done here with their exhibit is to create a wonderful, remarkable learning opportunity for people of southwestern Minnesota, entire state, upper Midwest, and I know people coming from all over the world in learning about the Holocaust through this specific lens. So we thank the Fagans for their generosity of spirit, their vision, and their commitment to Holocaust education as they teach about the Second World War.
We're very happy to call the JCRC friends. They have visited the museum a number of times. Were very helpful in our Holocaust exhibit when we were building that at Split Rock Studios. And we are thrilled to be the recipient of their yearly award.
Someday, sooner than we'd like, the headline will read, "Last World War II Veteran Dies." When that day comes, how will we connect the greatest generation with the latest generation? Restoring these things to their original power and function, and capturing the stories of those members of the greatest generation who are still with us, offers not only a portal to the past, but an immortal connection to America's future generations.
People keep repeating that you'll never fall in love. and everybody keeps retreating, but you can't seem to get enough. Let my love open the door. Let my love open the door. Let my love open the door to your heart. Let my love open the door. Let my love open the door. Let my love open the door